How will the African Union manage the continent? The bloc's leadership gathers yet again as Africa grapples with many challenges. But are African leaders up to the task? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Leaders from 55 African nations are meeting in Ethiopia for the annual African Union Summit. This year is different than others. The Russian foreign minister toured the continent last week as the Wagner Group's involvement in some of the continent's conflicts is increasing. All this comes as France's influence in West Africa is dwindling remarkably. Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Mali are lobbying to reinstate their countries to the African Union. They lost their seats following military coups. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is also joining the leaders in the capital, Addis Ababa, together with the European Council President Charles Michel. So what's on the agenda? Leaders will discuss widespread conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and insecurity in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Sudan. Another major topic will be food security. Many people are going hungry in several regions, with Somalia close to famine. The group will also debate regional cooperation. Talks between Sudan and Ethiopia and Libya's stalled transition are among top concerns. On a broader level, governments will discuss a request for permanent African seats on the United Nations Security Council and the G20 group of major economies. All right, for more on all this, I'm joined by our guests. In Kampala is Victor Ochen, Director for African Youth Initiative Network. In Rabat is Mohammed Loulichki, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South, a Moroccan think tank that focuses on economic and social public policies. And in London is Jonathan Offei-Ansah, founder and publisher at Africa Briefing magazine. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks for being with us on Inside Story today. Victor, let me start with you today. The 2023 African Union Summit is going to be taking place at a very fraught time for the continent. How important is it that this be a productive summit?
Thank you. I think the 2023 AU Summit is definitely coming at a point when there's so much global interest, the geostrategic significance of Africa, given the current global situation about the increasing tension between the superpowers and all that. But the question comes, what role, what will Africa play in terms of this global security, peace, and all this? What would be the most cohesive voice that African Union or African bloc can come forward and present? Of course, at the end of the day, you look at, there's been reason for need to consolidate the African position. They have always got these ambiguous policies around issues driven by state political fragility and identity-based politics that has been problematic. So I hope the African Union Summit this time will bring highlights on situation around the continent right now, which are of significance, most importantly, addressing the need to address the regional conflict. Yes.
Right. Victor, let me follow up with you on a point that you were making there when it comes to the competition between the global superpowers right now and the role Africa is playing, because you've had Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, you've had the new Chinese Foreign Minister, you've had the U.S. Treasury Secretary, all have embarked on African tours within the past month. Russia, China, the U.S., they are all trying to expand their footprints in Africa right now. So how much geopolitical bargaining power does that give Africa at this moment?
Yes, you did mention so well. You did mention the superpowers. Look at how United States has gone on to establish very strong strategic infrastructure for engagement in Africa through broad-reaching, diplomacy, development, and security issues. And also look at how European Union has made it a point that they want to consolidate its renewed commitment in the continent. China, another superpower, but also looking at the UK, the Russia, the India. All these are all delivering significant, development which are very important economic and security point of view. But now you look at how will Africa position itself? Will it reach a point where Africa will be forced to join different orders? Or the situation is quite opaque because we need to know. Everybody is saying, let's now look at how do we get our position, our standing quite clear in Africa. But then the force will come. What will Africa do? Are they going to be forced to pick sides on which one to go with, or they are going to say, as a continent, we have got our own history, we need our own agenda, we have our own ambition is to focus and build our, mainstream political, economic, and insecurity point of this nature. I think Africa should not be a battleground, but we should look into how we seek and to secure a partnership that will help us strengthen peace and stability in the continent.
Jonathan, I saw you nodding along to some of what Victor was saying there, so I'm going to give you a chance to jump in. But I also want to ask you, what are the priorities of this summit? And from your vantage point, what's expected to come out of it?
Well, I always say that in the past, AU summits have come to be regarded as a mere, talk shop for, Africa's leaders. But the time has come, in view of the geopolitical situation, we find ourselves in today, currently. Victor mentioned, the visits by, the new Chinese foreign minister, recently by Sergei Lavrov from Russia, Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, as well as the U.S. ambassador to the UN. They've all made visits to Ghana. And the question African leaders need to ask is, why, this interest in Africa? Okay, from where I'm sitting, I see that all these major powers are courting Africa because Africa has something to offer. Africa has something that they need, right? So this is the time. Look, we have the European Union, we have the Asian countries, they're all strong economic blocs. We set up the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, okay, to facilitate, increase intra-African trade and all that. Yeah, but we need to look outside. Why these big powers are courting us? We must know what we have, what we possess that they need, and know how to leverage it to the continent's advantage. So to me, this summit, should be all-encompassing. Talk about the security situation on the continent, talk about climate change, and talk about economy, how we can leverage our resources to our utmost advantage.
Mohammed, African leaders are going to advocate for permanent seats for the continent on the UN Security Council. They also want to join the G20. What are the chances that these goals are achievable?
Well, let me begin by saying that Africa does not accept anymore to be on the menu, but want to be around the table with the other powers. In terms of having a legitimate seat in the Security Council of the United Nations, but also having its say whenever the global challenges are addressed, to have its say in and to have its contribution. Africa is courted, as my friend said before me, by all the superpowers, not only because of its natural resources, but because also of the potential, the economic potential that Africa is going to have in 2030 and 2050. 2030, Africa will be 1.2 billion consumer. Population will be 1.2, and in 2050, it will be 2 billion, 25. We will be the third region in demographically the most important. And with this increase in demography comes consumers. Africa will have between 700 and 800 consumers from middle class. It's a huge market, and it will benefit from the free trade agreement, the Continental Free Trade Agreement, but it is also an open market for all the other powers, because Africa now is open to real partnership. It's not anymore a monopoly of one or the other superpowers, but it is open to real partnership in which African will set the agenda, will set the the priorities and will set the objectives of such partnership.
Jonathan, one of the issues that's expected to dominate during this summit is the push by West African states of Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Mali to be reinstated to the AU after being stripped of their membership following military coups. How large a role do you think this is going to play during the summit, and is that something that could happen? Could we see them be reinstated?
I don't see that happen, at this year's summit because, look, AU, ECOWAS, and other regional bodies, have come out strongly against, any military, or any coup d'etat. I mean, they say that they lead to destabilization, of various countries and therefore their respective regions. So now, but now that they've set the roadmap, Mali, Guinea, the ECOWAS has already set a roadmap for them to return to civilian rule. Until that roadmap is achieved, I doubt if the AU will reinstate them, into the body.
Victor, how much are African countries riven by identity politics? I'm talking about tribalism, I'm talking about sectarianism, and how much does all that hamper what the AU is able to accomplish in its work?
Again and again, it has also resulted into massive organized criminal activities across, and you have seen very serious political mistrust that has continued to define the continent. Home and abroad, you find, the next country is being used as the house for the next conflict in the neighboring countries. And all these protracted experiences of both domestic and external political instability has been a good reason for mass atrocities in the region. And we have seen that continued propaganda along tribes, along ethnicity, along religious affiliations has created always a very big, deplorable reaction from different countries, and it's been really difficult. And it has attracted massive migration. We have seen that by study, we've found that after every 10 to 15 years, mass atrocities happen, especially in the Great Lakes region. And the region has seen numerous, and the reason is simply because young people are born into conflict. They are told who their enemies are. They are told why they are suffering. They're told why they're in a refugee camp. They're told why they're out of their country. By the time they reach 10 to 15 years old, they're strong enough and they want to strike back. And these are the kind of things. We have got that generational transfer of trauma, of pain, of challenges. So it has been difficult for us to be able to help the young people, young generation, transform their trauma, their pain, their history into an opportunity for leadership. And that's why we have seen there's been that ethnicized politics, ethnic development, ethnic government, ethnic progress. This is where the problem comes. As long as we're unable to dissect the ethnicity, the ethnic ingredients in the African democracy, it's always going to be a problem for the continent. That's an area that we need to look at. What is that is needed for AU to talk openly, to talk transparently about this issue among themselves? We are seeing cross-border tension, inter-country tension. Governments are defined by tribalisms, and all this kind of thing becomes the ingredient for more conflict. How do we get to it is one thing that AU should focus on.
Mohammed, from your vantage point, how is the African Union doing when it comes to coordinating with regional blocs, whether that pertains to security issues or economic issues? How is the AU doing when it comes to that?
I think we have to understand the fact that African Union is an intergovernmental organization. So it is about trying to coordinate policies of sovereign states. It has nothing to do, for example, with the European Union, for which the member state decided to delegate some of their competencies. African Union is an intergovernmental organization. So it can only be efficient if the member states have the political will to allow the African Union to really coordinate between themselves. I think that compared to the OAU, the African Union managed to structure itself in an architecture dealing with peace and security that is beginning to yield some fruits and some results. Of course, in any structure, you have always the necessity to coordinate. There are maybe sometimes duplication between the regional economic commissions and the African Union, and there is a need to harmonize, the need to really deal with the subsidiarity rule between the African Union as such and its economic regional commission. Now, in dealing with peace and security is a global issue. African Union and African member states cannot deal with issues like terrorism, like conflicts, like development, without the contribution of the international community. One has to acknowledge also that compared to the other regional organization, African Union has a very comprehensive mandate dealing with peace, security, development, integration, health, etc., etc. So it cannot be compared in terms of efficiency and mandate with other regionals. We have to give the benefit of doubt to the African Union. We have to African Union. It is on the right path, but we have, I think, to be extremely patient and understanding and enabling the African Union to discharge its huge mandates in peace and security, but also in development, economic and social development.
Jonathan, from your vantage point, just how effective is the AU? There are a lot of critics that say that its standards have been eroded when it comes to member states. Do you think that's the case? And there's so many challenges impacting the continent right now. Are African leaders up to the task?
I believe, like Mohammed said, compared to the OAU, which was, was referred to as the old men's club, and then looking at the AU today, and I said earlier that some of us used to see it as a talk show. I believe I see some gradual progress, some gradual result. I see some increasing political will. Right. This is highlighted by the establishment of the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. Okay, and we have the AU Peace and Security Council. Look, you talk about the Ethiopian Tigray War that ended late last year. I mean, the mediation was mainly facilitated by fellow African leaders, by the AU. Okay, without any Western nations playing a major role. Though they had a hand, but it was mainly facilitated by AU members. So I see, a gradual, resolve, coming up. I see the political will increasing. But at the end of the day, look, we are at the mercy of external forces. Okay, AU is look, the AU headquarters itself was donated by China, built and donated by China. Okay. Some members cannot even, pay their dues on time, okay? And even now, the EU is relying on, again, external funding, for its operations, okay? So, and the common proverb is, he who pays the piper, calls the tune. So until African leaders are able to get their act together, increase their result, there'll be more talk than action. But so far, I believe that the word is there, and if things are put right, we can go, further than we are now.
Victor, of course, one of the biggest concerns when it comes to Africa right now is hunger. And so it's expected that, one of the biggest subjects of discussion during this summit is going to be the worsening hunger in several regions. Somalia is on the verge of famine. That's just one example. What are some of the concrete steps that can be taken to help this situation, to help improve this situation, to combat this?
Yeah, about the hunger, let's actually pick from the Horn of Africa. I think two major issues to address would be one, to address the question of migration, the question of movement. People are moving from one part to another, and they're unable to produce at all. And if AU really wishes to address the causes of all these multiple crises, I think it's important that we need to address the question of what makes people to move. What are the reasons why people are moving from one place to another, unable to produce stuff? Of course, there are natural disasters, the element of natural disasters, the drought. We have diseases, we have floods, we have also, most importantly, inequality in the governance system that makes it very difficult for people to progress. But of course, the most important thing is also the climate change issues. The region is experiencing a very difficult time. You mentioned Somalia, you mentioned Ethiopia. Look at Kenya. We're seeing, the animals are drying to death. And I think it's very important to know that with the weather pattern and already, which is causing a massive food shortages in the region and severe impact on social infrastructure, we need to be able to, how do we navigate the question of climate crisis with the intent, address climate crisis with focus on food security, with focus on domestic livelihood. It comes down to policies. There's so much we need to invest. There's so much that we can do and we must do as a continent in order to be able to avert the looming hunger crisis. Otherwise, we are going to be all going in this kind of, we have massive opportunity, the demographic power, the young people. We have so much energy of young people. And to me, the energy is the right energy for progress. But how are we using it? How are we using the energy of those young people? We are forcing them to move away. We are forcing them to leave their communities which they're supposed to stay. We're seeing massive rural-urban migration. People are moving away from where they can produce to where they can come and stay in the slums, in the suburbs of the cities and urban settings. So if we can, it will be a challenge to our government to look at, to address the question of how can you attract people to the productive sectors of our society, in this case is agriculture. But also, how can you create an environment for young people to thrive? Make agriculture rewarding. Make living in the rural communities where productivity takes place rewarding. But if development infrastructure stops at the nation's capital, we are not able to counter the prospect for massive looming hunger. So the opportunity lies within our countries, but it comes down to policies. I think also, let's be honest, our African government should commit to going away from politics of poverty, where you keep people poor for easy manipulation and easy control. Let's see how can we help our young people progress and want to stay home and want to contribute to the national development.
Right. Mohammed, I want to ask you about peacekeeping missions. When it comes to peacekeeping missions, how difficult have they been for the AU to finance? And is there progress being made when it comes to contributing to funding of peacemaking and peace support operations on the continent?
Well, if you allow me, because you said what African countries can do concretely in terms of dealing with food insecurity. Let me just take 1 minute and then I will address
go ahead.
The issue of the peace. I just would like to say that the hunger or food insecurity at the crossroad of climate change, productivity of agriculture, and conflict resolutions. There are some concrete initiatives that have been taken, for example, by Morocco with 14 or 15 other African countries in terms of promoting the productivity of the agriculture in these countries by using fertilizer, by analyzing the nature of soil. And I think we have managed to be successful with some countries, for example, like Kenya, like Ethiopia, like Nigeria, like Cote d'Ivoire, and others, in which this combination between the two, in the framework of South-South cooperations, is yielding some very promising results. Now, let me move to the peacekeeping. I said earlier that peace and security is a global issue. It concerns all the international community, not only the Africans. The fact that most of the peacekeeping operations are in Africa doesn't mean that Africa has by itself to deal with the issue. It is something that Africa is trying to do with the means that are available. But for the present and let's say for the near future, I think that the African Union and its economic regional commissions still need support in logistics, in training, and in financing. For the time being, about 75% of the budget is coming from outside of the African countries. And the implementation of 2% that was adopted after the report of President Kagame on the reform of the financing of the peacekeeping operation by the African Union is something that can enable the Africa to be more involved financially in dealing with its conflict. Yet, it is a responsibility of the international community. And it is a responsibility of the international community, especially now that conflicts are mixed with the challenge of terrorism and violent extremism.
All right, well, we have run out of time, so we're going to have to leave our discussion there. Thanks so much to all of our guests, Victor Ochen, Mohammed Loulichki, and Jonathan Offei-Ansah. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here in Doha. Bye for now.